Maybe that's what happens when.
Hello. Well, we are back to where we started many months ago to experiment with things and ended up with issues regarding um, technical difficulties. I guess we could play it safe and just to do what we know, but I feel the need to advance. And we were trying to bring you a video within a video. We're just going to have to look at how to do that, not now. So sorry for those of you who were doing this. Yeah, multiple issues. And I guess it just teaches us patience. So, well, I wonder how you all have been. Feel free to subscribe. Feel free to leave comments in the section so we know what's helpful and not helpful. Couple of things I thought I would talk about, and we're using another version so I can't show you pictures of things, but I guess I'll just talk about things. I was going to talk about masks for a while. It seems like such an old subject, something that's just so over talked about, but I felt like there could be some value to talk about this. I was in another state, we'll say Idaho, and what was fascinating is I saw a sign that said, mask wearing is not about politics, it's about an intelligence test. I thought that was actually kind of humorous. Then I felt like, okay, I understand the put down of it. It might have originally meant to determine if you're smart enough to wear a mask. But then I thought, thinking too much anyway, but I thought, well, maybe it's about measuring your ability to read through the literature to be able to determine whether it's helpful to wear a mask or not wear a mask. And a little bit farther down the road, I thought, well, maybe it's even more than that, and moving more in the area of emotional intelligence. Like, do we wear masks to help other people feel comfortable rather than, I think those two extremes, well, at least one extreme that I see where I'm not going to wear a mask. You can never make me wear a mask. I really don't care about anything, anybody around me. You're not going to make me wear a mask. Could this person get COVID? Sure, they could. Could they spread it around? Sure, they could. So that's a concern. I think the key word is test. It is a test. It's testing us, I think, spiritually to know how to handle situations where we're told to do something that we may not want to do, or we may have strong emotion around it. We may have beliefs around it. And if we step back and pray and ask God for direction, God for guidance, we'll probably find out what we need to do and what we need to learn about it. I don't think it's really totally clear. It's not clear. The research can go either way. I do know this, standing back and looking at this, that it's a really emotional issue for a lot of people. Fear on both sides of the spectrum. Fear that if I begin to wear a mask, then it'll never come off. The government is going to close my mouth and make it so that I can never talk again about anything. It's like the beginning of the end. I think the other extreme is where we're really not thinking, while reading the research, that is this mask actually going to protect me from the virus? Well, no. Is it going to really protect? If I'm infected and I'm really contagious, is wearing this mask going to stop me from spreading it? One researcher I tend to like says you get a 10 extra minutes. If you have 10 minutes in a room, if you're really infected and you're going to spread it, it gives you 10 more minutes. Do masks help us in other ways? Maybe, if it keeps me from touching my face and mouth, and it makes me aware that I'm in a public place and to be careful. I think there's micro behaviors associated with mask wearing, but it's also tested us from the aspect of peer pressure. Like, if everybody's wearing a mask and if you're not, do you actually feel comfortable? Or if it's the opposite, where everybody's not wearing a mask and maybe five people are wearing a mask, do you really feel like you stand out? Yeah. And if you know that some people are very opinionated either way on masks, do you feel the emotional energy around all that? I think we do. I think this is testing our spirituality in many ways. With difficult situations like this, we could ask ourselves, how has love come into this? How am I being loving, kind, patient, long suffering in this situation? And you could, I don't like the word argue, but you could explain this either way. You can explain it in a way that by wearing a mask, I am long suffering, I'm concerning, not about what I want. I don't know anybody who really enjoys wearing the mask, but I think that out of love and concern for their brother and sister, that they would do so. Um, it's also, for some, an act of obedience. They may not actually agree with it, but they feel that God wants them to be obedient to authorities, to the church, and so they comply. There are others that feel that no, this is the beginning of church leaders being wrong about something, and we're going to stand up and put a foot down now. And there's value to that as well. I think there's many freedoms that are lost with the beginning of something that seems innocuous. And so then to wear a mask and maybe be the only few people to wear a mask could take courage, but to actually not wear a mask, I saw a few people in a store the other day not wear a mask. Um, yeah, no, it's a very interesting thing. And I think if we don't pray about it or analyze it just a bit, we may miss something that we could benefit from. Um, on top of this, we ended up with some strong smoke in our area. So strong that we were putting a mask to go outside. And what kind of mask was I wearing? An N95. Probably, I don't wear those often, but I bought those a couple of years ago when it was pretty bad smoke. So that's the end of mask wearing for tonight. I'm going to try to fix the light here, so that it looks a little bit better. My watch, I just accidentally touched my watch that said I was going on a walk. How interesting is that? What did I do this week that I would like to share with you? Well, I will say this. Someone I have followed on the internet, who I know a little bit about, but not a tremendous amount, but he's a psychologist in Canada, Jordan Peterson, who seems to be taking the world by storm. Very interesting life. Very interesting. I ended up watching his, he didn't create it, but there was a video, a documentary made on his life called The Rise of Jordan Peterson. I'm interested in a couple of ways. One is he is a psychologist, and so I find things around psychology fascinating. Two, he seems to have had concerns about, we'll say the word politics, but I think it's deeper than that. You know, the outward world in which we live. He seems to be a very passionate gentleman who has a deep concern about the ways society is going, and was able to speak up about freedom of speech and being able to talk in the way he wanted to talk. He could see that laws regarding gender pronouns, in which there in Canada appeared to be some kind of speech requirement to say the right words. And if you don't say the right words regarding a person who may not have a gender identity that's well defined, you could get fined. And he said, while he admits that that exists, people who want to identify with male or female or some other kind of gender, which is a whole other discussion. His point was, I should have the freedom to say what I want to say. And he could see the writing on the wall that if we can't even say what we want to say, that that's the beginning of not a good place to be. And this actually has been happening in the world of psychology for a long time. Political correctness has gotten really out of hand. Like, for instance, and I'll be kind of bold here, not as bold as Jordan Peterson, but, and I'll get back to him, but like somehow the powers that be want us to not even use the word addict because they don't feel that that's respectful enough. And for years we used it in a kind, respectful way, saying, you know, addicts struggle with this, or they think in all or nothing thinking. Now we need to say people who struggle with addiction, but I don't think that's as simple as just saying an addict. I don't think therapists point the finger, you addict, to. I think people who struggle with addiction aren't going to all of a sudden get out of denial because we don't use words like addict anymore, but someone who struggles with addiction, I think they'll still be, no, I'm not a person who struggles with addiction. So I think some of this is just very controlling. And another takeaway, which I found interesting, is that he suggested, maybe I got this wrong, he's much smarter than I, but he said that when people begin to identify as a group, something different happens than if we kind of focus on individual responsibility. He wrote a book called, I think, 12 Rules for Living. One of the rules is clean your room, which seems funny, but I love it. What he was saying is that in cleaning our room, some may say, reflects who we are. But he even says that it is who we are, that it's kind of like, it's what's going on. If our environment is chaotic without structure, it's going to not only make us that, but that's who we are. So let's be responsible, clean our room. You know, for young men, this book seems to have had a powerful effect, as well as the speech about, well, I'll just say the young men who listened to him with tears in their eyes, saying, this is just incredible. He's like a role model, a father that they haven't really had, and that they're actually going and doing something that makes a difference. And there are so many things I think we get caught up in that make no bit of difference at all. Whether it's watching too much media, half the texts aren't that important. Gaming really goes nowhere. I mean, I'm not totally against gaming, but I do think that it has this aspect where it's a fake sense of accomplishment. Like, if we went back 40 years and our parents asked us, well, what did you do? Oh, I played the game of life like 5 times. They would look at us like, really? How about go get a life? You know? Oh, I played Battleship. Well, you know, there's a huge difference between playing the game of Battleship or playing a video game of flying an airplane, and actually flying an airplane, or doing something well, you know, doing something we can be proud of in the good sense of the word. So I think he's onto something. But where did I learn more about his life? Well, I was floating through YouTube and did notice that he had some update. And I thought, well, that's interesting, about his family. And there was this sense that something bad happened. Well, I'm going to take a sip of this here. He unfortunately goes through a hellish experience, just a hellish experience um, with opiates, or not opiates, sorry. Wow, that's a mistake. With benzodiazepines. And how did this happen? Very, very commonly, just by a doctor saying, I'm sorry, you're going through a hard time. You're having a hard time sleep. Here's a benzodiazepine. They do this a lot, in my humble opinion, but strong opinion, way too much. And then they're not there to pick up the pieces afterwards. Long-term use of these chemicals, you end up with worse anxiety than when you started. I'd say once a month, someone comes in with this. Their life is a living hell. Yeah, I don't think I'm understating that. I'm not saying hell isn't really bad, but it's probably one of the most difficult things I witness. And you just have to watch it. You just have to watch it for yourself. I'm not going to talk too much about it because, um, well, first of all, he's a very intelligent man. I think he means good in the world. I don't think he's out there just doing things for money. I don't think that at all. I don't think he's that actually interested in fame. I think he's just trying to do the right thing. And with this, his wife ended up getting cancer. He, I think some of the stress of what he has been through caught up with him, and he started to get anxiety and built up tolerance. So he goes through an experience trying to get off of them, has to go to Russia for help for 9 days, is kind of in a semi-conscious or unconscious state to detox, comes out of this, gets, and during this he ended up having sickness with catching pneumonia. After that, he's now in Serbia recovering from COVID. So a lot of suffering. I can't even begin to imagine what he's been through. But maybe God has a plan for his life. Maybe God will use him as a spokesperson to talk about the dangers of this. I wouldn't put that on him now, but his life is a testimony of what these drugs can do. And it was very validating for me to see this. Very validating, because I know that people come to see me, they're either sold on medications, and then I ask, well, then why are you here? If medication is working so well for you, then why do you want something else to fix it? And I understand it may be not all or nothing. But then I have people that are not only on medicine, but then they want to be on marijuana. It's like, well, then why are you here? This is just too many chemicals you're putting into your brain, and you're trying to make sense of how to live a life without that. I do work with people on the other camp that really don't want medicine. They're doing everything they can to live a life without medicine. But we live in such a medicine saturated society that that's all they want is give me something quick to make the pain go away. We are not oriented to be able to withstand any uncomfortable feelings. It's just how there's almost a hard wiring now, because we're so accustomed to not feeling well. We quickly do something to make our state change. And I think that there is some value to realize sometimes we're just going to suffer through something, and it's going to take a long time, but in the end, it will be worth it. I do think that we see this in sports. Athletes know what it is to suffer, purposefully putting their body through some rigors, and then at the end they get, a crown of victory, or they completed the race. Yeah, I think this sounds tough, but we need to toughen up. And I have been through my share of being on both camps. And I think that we will actually paradoxically feel better if we allow ourselves to go through pain and suffering rather than go kicking and screaming anything we can do to avoid it. Um, I think what's interesting is everybody has limits, and we all do. We all can only do so much before we begin to wear out, whether it's physically, um, whether it's emotionally. We need to find balance. We need to find, um, what do I want to say here? Balance isn't always, we need balance, but there's times we need to be imbalanced. If we're always in balance, we may not have the energy or the momentum or the force to self-correct. So, for instance, I might actually have been taking medication. Well, I feel balanced. When I begin to go off, I don't feel balanced at all. Is that the right direction? It is. If my goal is to get off of medication and to find a way to be balanced without the medicine. If we're talking in spiritual terms, balance is good, not overdoing it, not underdoing it. But on a different principle, when we begin to move towards God and make some huge changes, we're going to not feel like our normal selves. That's just normal. That's a typical experience of growth. When people come into therapy, they're imbalanced, and that can be a very, very good thing. It's this a place of not being in a stabilized state, but we can use it for growth. Same thing with families that are really out of balance. Again, I had a professor, I was going to say old professor, we're all older now, but a former professor who said, when the heat gets turned up, figure out where you want that popsicle stick to be, because when it freezes, that's where it'll be. I never thought of, I think a lot about that. When you're under pressure, how do you want to be? And if you develop good habits, like this COVID drama with riots, systemic racism, government control, election, all this stuff, is an opportunity. If it's not this, it'll be something else, but it's an opportunity for us to define how we want to be as people. It's this test that will help us decide. In my experience, not when everything is exactly the way I want it, the big comfy chair that I get everything I want. If I experienced that one day, I'm not sure that it wouldn't make me sick at some level. Talk about imbalance, like the perfect day, the perfect breakfast, the perfect amount of movement, the perfect media to consume. I'm talking naturalistic and materialistic here, the perfect bath or jacuzzi experience, the perfect book. It doesn't exist for one, but I think it would make me sick. I think it would be like being locked away in a bubble and not having any hardship, no aches or pains. I'm actually laughing because there are days when things are so hard, I feel like I just want to go in a jacuzzi filled with Novocaine. Just let me just soak in that. I know I don't want that. It's pain that motivates us to do better. It's pain that helps me realize people are suffering in the world. Without that pain and suffering, we wouldn't. It would be weird. I'm not even predicting what heaven will be like when I say this, but I don't think it'll be what I described. I think it would be grander than that. But I do know that there won't be suffering as we know it. Can we find joy in the midst of pain and suffering? I think we can. I think we can. And I've tried lots of things like, how do I put this? Um, Supplements and good sleep and exercise and psychological practices, meditative practices. Some of these are good. Changing your mind about things can really turn things. Reading a good book, listening to good music, eating some food in moderation, etc. But I'm finding that, at least for me, I've got to just find a connection with God in the midst of this, because those things don't satisfy. At least this is just my experience. They don't. There is no thing on this earth that will give me as much of what I need, is finding this in God's grace, the Son, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That I don't know how to describe it, but I think it's important. I think it's maybe pain and suffering that um, C.S. Lewis said helps. Pain and suffering is God's megaphone to a deaf world. So we need these things to help us. And I think when we accept that and embrace that as being okay, it's okay, we will be able to survive. Now, I want to be encouraging to those that are very fearful of pain and suffering, of which I've had my own share. Like, if I break down everything that I'd be afraid of, it's because I don't want to suffer. I just don't want to suffer whatever I think that would be, whether it's a chronic illness, whether it's a loss of a loved one. I work with it every single day, seeing tragedy. And I think, oh my gosh, why not me? Why do I have the life that I have? And hopefully this helps me to be more humble, that I'm not in control, more thankful. But I think, well, what if this happens to me, and will I be strong enough, etc.? Well, of course I won't be strong enough. That's where I have to tap into God's power. Second of all, I've had a few pains and sufferings where I thought, well, I had some transformative experiences where I felt actually joy in the midst of it. And I realized, wait a minute, nothing has changed regarding my health or a certain situation. How can I be happy in this? And I realized it was God's grace. And then I realized, aha, this is not about changing the world to make Eric happy. This is about not even going down that path, but going down the path of finding God in these situations. That's where we find comfort. He is the God of all comfort. Really important. I don't even know exactly how to do that other than simple practices. I would point you, if those are really interested, to some people who are Orthodox Christians, seem to know some of these good practices, the practice of the Jesus prayer. There's monks and nuns and priests that speak about this. I would visit an Orthodox church. Wow, I'm being bold here, but in the midst of all that's gone on, there seems to be, at least for me, such joy and comfort in knowing that God is beyond all this. He's beyond any kind of pandemic or any government orders or kids not being in school or sickness or suffering or financial difficulty. And if it wasn't this, there'd be something else. In fact, I'm more convinced that if we got everything we wanted, we'd be more in trouble than we are today. And I'm not trying to belittle people's suffering. I think they need to know that it means something, that it can be useful. Think in terms of Viktor Frankl. So it's not about fighting over masks. It's not about fighting with, anybody in terms of what's going wrong in the world, or um, but knowing our limits and knowing that we can only do so much in our own strength. We have to empty ourselves to find God in this situation. We're not going to find it in medication. I don't think medication is going to give us peace. Uh, if so, only temporary, and it's not lasting peace for sure. I had a friend who jokingly said, "Oh, better living through chemistry." And it makes you think of the 1950s and how the world was going to be saved by science. Not putting down science, it's just that science can only go so far. And we have demonstrated this, and politics can only go so far to help people with peace. In fact, I would go so far, they're not really doing that great of a job of it. I think they're probably bringing more unpeace. Um, Churches are great, but I would say that it has to be a direct experience with God Himself, not His who He is because He's beyond us, but at least His energies that we could participate in. This is how we know we've been touched by God, and that it's inexplainable. Inexplicable. You can't explain it. I don't know how to describe it. But um, why does this come up in psychology? Because psychology can only go so far. You can only change your thoughts, which I think is a really good idea. I like cognitive behavioral therapy. I love dialectical behavior therapy. I love neurofeedback. I love 12-step recovery, although that hints at what I'm going to say next. But it's not that transformative of somehow interacting with the creator of the universe. If this was my problem, this is what I'm holding on to, I can try to fix this myself. I can try to analyze this myself. I can try to use a medication or a supplement to try to fix this. Or I can say, God, I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to do in this situation. Come help me. I am poor in spirit right now. I have no good ideas. I'm at the end of my rope with this. I'm done analyzing it. I'm done trying to fix it. I'm done trying to control it. I'm letting it go. I'm putting it into your hands. I sometimes have to hurl down violently my cares. That sounds like funny language, but it says, cast your cares upon Him, for He cares for you. I looked up the word cast. What does cast mean? Well, it means to hurl down violently. Same word is used to cast out a demon. So you mean our cares stick to us, like we can't let go of them? That's right. And perhaps there's actual spiritual forces that are working at us to make us depressed, bring us down, terrorize us, get us stuck. And I'm not saying everything's spiritual, but I don't think everything's materialistic for 1 minute. Good evidence for this is how many intelligent people, really smart people, spent 20, 30 years trying to analyze why they overeat, and they still overeat, and they seem to be headed towards unhealth, or take drugs or alcohol or spending or anger. Like people with anger problems, just stop being angry. It doesn't work. It seems a better explanation of what's going on is that there are spiritual forces that interact with us that try to bring us down. And there are sicknesses in our soul we can call the passions, or which the early church could talk about the passions. The passion of pride, which is this inflated sense of self. It's a distorted sense of self. Pride says I am too good, but it also says I am too bad. It's it's the only way we can find a wise estimation of ourselves is in God and in the context of God. If I am going to solve any of my problems without his help, then I'm being prideful, not to be judgmental and put down people that may not have faith, but that's one option. Um, a humble person comes to God and says, I don't know what to do. Please help me. And with tears in their eyes, gets to the place where I just have no more good ideas. When we get to that place where we're willing to let go of everything, God might actually start to come to us. And we have what we could call the spiritual experience. After that, we go, I can't believe this. Something that was in my life for years now is somehow being dissembled and taken away. And then we realized everything I did to try to get rid of it on my own was not helpful. And yes, prayers and striving and maybe good way was all part of the story to get me to a place where I became convinced of this, that I had no power in myself to stop my overeating or any other addiction. Other passions include anger. Another good example of anger, all the way on one spectrum, could be just judging people, putting people down, thinking critically, to where actually I'm displaying verbal anger, to where now I'm not getting what I want, so I'm going to be controlling and physically pushing, shoving, all the way out here to downright hatred or prejudices in there, judging, objectifying people, to where I actually kill people, or even a global war is that. That's why I have a hard time with movies that put man in this grandiose place. Like usually it's science fiction where the the storyline goes, we've evolved to the place where we have such compassion, we never have any problems. The funny thing is, there's still a story, and there's still evil and bad and good fighting each other in the midst of whatever it is, Star Trek or Star Wars or etc. Um, so it's fascinating to me. I think it's nice to watch those things in the sense, at least, it's hinting at our experience and that there is spiritual forces. But those that don't examine any spiritual force, I think, is missing out on something. Um, and maybe there's a few people that have overcome anger by medications, believe it or not. They want to give anti seizure medicine for this intermittent explosive disorder. Again, we'll just drug you to make it go away. Um, or repetitive anger management skills. I did have a friend who was one of the led the top anger management skills in America, and she said something pretty well. She said it's insightful. She says, "Well, the skills work when you use them." Yeah, it's true. So why don't we do this? I think it's because we struggle. The early church said that anger was temporary insanity. We go from a state that seemed okay to then being so hot and bothered, so angry, we're beside ourselves, and then we come to and realize, wow, why was I so angry? Add alcohol, add drugs to that, marijuana. I mean, these things sedate you, and then when you come off of them, you're angrier than when you were started. The 12-step people talk about being addicted to resentment, where you can't let go of anything. And there's brain processes you can measure on that. You can see it, areas of the brain called cingulate gyrus. But I think that there's spiritual forces. The church also had what they call gluttony, which people don't necessarily think about these days. It's not a popular word to use, although we made jokes about it, like I'm gluten free. If you want to mispronounce it, I'm glutton free. But even gluten free bread or pastries may taste so delectable that we eat too many of them, and then we're eating too much sugar, and then we're sick than when we started. Yeah, that one I think is fascinating. Where I sit, there are people that tried everything, even surgeries. It doesn't work well, and then they go to 12-step, work through the steps, and then the compulsion leaves. Yeah. So I would say scientifically, if we just observe that that program works better than the other programs, but that's just my observation. Envy, greed are passions. There's soul sicknesses where we're really not happy with what we have. We are taught that we don't have enough, and we become very, very unhappy because we want something that we do not have. And it seems to be insatiable. These also could be an over too much interaction with the material world, that I'm trying to find peace through things and amassing either wealth or nice house, nice carpet, nice clothing, the softest blanket, the coziest jacuzzi, the best screen TV. You would think we would be exuberant with joy and happiness. We can push buttons on a little device and the pizza can come to the door. We don't even need to dial. We push a button, the door opens or it closes, the TV turns on and switches a channel. It's not just 7 channels, it's 70 channels. And air conditioning that's smart. It turns itself on, it turns itself off. It gets the house cozy when you come home. We have a car, which I'm really pleased with, but now it helps you change lanes. It helps you know how not to follow too close and helps you with backup camera. I mean, it's just like great. And I think it's nice to have this, but I'm wondering how little will we need to do? And what are the effects of this? That I think it's affecting us in a way. So that's that. And then there's other types of passions. Now this one's fascinating. It's called sloth. 12 steps have a phrase that's kind of interesting. It says sloth. Procrastination is just a 5-syllable word for sloth. Sloth is so powerful, it makes us go through our life using it up without realizing we're using it up, that we're pushing off what we could do today till tomorrow. It says, yes, there is medicine for you, if this was medicine, but drink it tomorrow. I see this with 12-steppers that, oh, don't go through the steps quickly, go through them slowly. Oh, where does it say that anywhere? It doesn't. No, there is no value in doing them slowly. In fact, many of us say that it took us 10 years, too late. We should have done this a lot sooner, but we just don't. It's because what stops us from that? I remember one day, somehow in my prayer time, decided to pray against sloth and just prayed for the virtue of diligence. It just, okay. It seems like randomly did that. It was in a prayer book. I did that. It's like, whoa. It was like I had asked God to take the brakes away from my life. It would be like scales being lifted from one's eyes when they're blind. Well, this is like all of a sudden, I was able to do what I needed to do with much more ease and flow, mental clarity. And then I thought, why on earth would I never not invite God? Why would I? Yeah, why would I? Well, I'm doing a double negative. Why would I not invite God, the creator of the universe, into everything I do? Why wouldn't I ask him for his help? Why wouldn't I ask him for some strength? Why wouldn't I ask him, what do you want me to do? And then give me the power to do that. Why would I not invite him into my darkest moments? Or why would I not? Why? Well, first of all, why would I rely on any strength that I have? It's because we're afflicted with this, we'll call it sin sickness. We're just afflicted with it. We're just distorted in the wrong way. So I'm not into tattoos, but if I get tattoo, I would say, remember this, Eric, try not to do anything in your own strength. Invite God in the moment you wake up. Invite him in when you sleep. Invite him into the middle of the day. Just invite him in and see what happens. I can guarantee you this, it will not be, if you're sincere, you'll have an experience. Yeah, no, it's God is not a person who will not love you if you let him love you. He is not going to be too difficult to find if you really want to find him. There is some verses that talk about keep seeking, keep knocking, keep asking, but I think that's in a way to keep us healthy. I can't even begin to understand why we're so easy fix. We ask God once and then we expect him to give us whatever we want. It doesn't work that way. But when we sincerely say, God, I don't want what I want anymore. I want your will, not mine. Yeah, this is my life. A rag. If I say, God, what do you want from me? I'll get something so much beyond what I ever wanted. Is it a nice Novocaine jacuzzi? No, but that's not life. That's not reality. Do I have joy in the midst of it? I do. I do. And I'm not even perfect. I'm not even close to perfect. But I do know that what you do is you just strive in the good sense of the word towards God, and he will find you. You admit your passions, or in 12-step language, character defects. And you will start to you'll start to have an experience. We have someone. It's great to see someone here. Kervin Martin. Yeah, great. Hopefully you're being helped. Um, as we typically have difficulties sometimes with technical difficulties. I will do a shout out to someone I found online. I'll put it in the notes. This is so funny. We're watching, I guess, a cartoon, and I will admit it was Veggie Tales, enjoying the moment. For those who don't know what Veggie Tales are, it's a kid's cartoon, Christian oriented, but really nice graphics for the time. I was watching it with my son who's in his 20s, where it's like retro, and it seemed to be a place of comfort for what we needed. Well, then there was a link to this gentleman, Joseph O'Brien, who seems to be an artist, a musician. Now we'll click on this. Actually, not a bad voice. And we listened to a few, and actually, these are really nicely well done. And turns out he has a Christian message, but it's really, I mean, he did this song on Job, which I was going to play tonight. It's called, I think it's This Man. But what's interesting is I had the thought, he's good. He should be on America's Got Talent. Well, I did a little bit of research. He was actually on there. Oh, well, that's so funny. And yeah, so it's funny how we think a little bit behind. But, well, let me know what you guys think in terms of what you want to know more about. We talk all kinds of things, from anxiety reduction to cognitive behavioral therapy to distortions in thought. Talked about the early challenges with COVID and with things, but I could go in many different directions. I could talk about how to help people deal with school issues, school at home, or uh, just whatever. Uh, Anxiety reduction is always a good, yeah, isn't that the truth? I will say this, that I didn't think in terms of anxiety reduction as being so global until this all kind of hit. I think some of us really, who felt so sure of ourselves and was so going to be okay, just a little bit of an invisible virus, and then the world's response to that, the lack of medical clarity, it's all really something. Okay, Jack Miller, thank you. Any advice for helping a child stay focused during online classes? I'll speak a little bit about that. I will say that my can I say this? I guess my daughter is a school teacher who is, I think, a very good teacher. In her youth, I may get in trouble with this. She and her brother would make these videos that were just hilarious. So hilarious that I was probably her biggest fan. They never got online because they were not allowed by her, but I'd be in tears. So now she's a school teacher and has to entertain children, and it's kindergarten. It's like, how is this going to happen? I work with children. They're coming in, and I will admit, this is beyond me right now. Like, they're depressed. They how do you they need to be with their buddies. They need to be with their girlfriends. They need to be outdoors, and they're being kept inside. I am really concerned about the long-term effects of this. And I do a lot of online coaching, and I realize there's a few things. One is we sit longer in a chair when we're doing online. There's something mesmerizing about this, and it's probably not going to be good for our bodies in the long run. So, for instance, I'll demonstrate. I do believe in a stand, sit, desk. So I'm going to stand and demonstrate a little bit. I got mine on Craigslist for $150. I did this originally because I had some back issues, and it was just so cool to think about standing. So I think standing and sitting would be good. I think that the educators really could do really some things where they have to make it so exciting, and probably 20-minute segments. I do a lot of EEG work, and we really can't pay attention. And here I've gone on for an hour, but I try to think in terms of 3 20-minute sections. We can't really go on and on and on without our eyes glazing over. I would be doing things with bouncy balls, where you sit on the bouncy ball. Even if it seems so distracting, we've got to make this more fun for them. EEG, and these are just a smattering, but I'll work on a list. EEG work, neurofeedback specifically, when we are standing at attention. In fact, when people are having a hard time paying attention, it's not even paying attention. When they're training for beta wave, it's so tiring you feel like passing out, especially people with ADD. When we stand up, it's a lot easier for them. And I noticed a beta wave buzz is easier for them to achieve. Then it made me think, stand at attention. And writing on the board. Now, apart from being scared to death that the whole class is watching your back as you're trying to do the math problem, that we may actually pay attention standing more. So I would look at things to help with that. Sleep, really important, important for anxiety. And you have to be gentle with how you get good sleep. You can't just make yourself sleep really well. But if you sleep really well, and most people will notice if they sleep really well, that focus is stronger. I get my best ideas in the morning. In fact, I wake up with good ideas sometimes. Well, I shouldn't say they're good, but they're good to me. And so I sit with the journal and write. I think I would have multicolored pens for them to either doodle. I would have a whiteboard in so that they could actually get up and write some of their homework assignments there in different colored pens. I would probably, depending on the age, have some kind of system where as a parent, I would reward them. I would sit them, have a heart to heart, like something you would see in a movie saying, look, I care about you, I love you, but guess what? We are going through history together. My grandparents didn't. I mean, my great grandparents went through this, but not my grandparents. They went through the Great Depression, but we are going to go through this together. And you need an education. You know, some parents are flimsy on that, but I'm not. Like, you need an education. You're going to need this. And I believe in God. And so God so allowed you to be at this time as a 5-year-old, as a 10, 15-year-old. And instead of just survive, why don't we thrive? What if you come up with some device or something that makes things so much better, either for anxiety or for kids getting through the school experience? There's a lot of opportunity here for someone to really help a lot of people. And I think that's what I tell my clients that are young. I don't know if they're jumping up and down about it, but I'm certainly encouraging them. Boy, Jack, that's a good question. I think I'm now quite inspired. We talked a little bit about Jordan Peterson, his book, 12 Rules for Living. We talked at the beginning about cleaning your room. I would have a clean room. I would somehow have a school room where they go in, they walk into school, and they get to walk out. And that looks like a schoolroom. And even if it means two brothers sharing a bedroom and the other bedroom's used for school, I'd probably do that. Bunk beds can be dangerous with, certain heights. Joseph brings up, my son, I think you mean exercise ball. Yeah, I want to be clear. So one of these round, big, bouncy balls wouldn't be a bad idea. They actually have chairs that are not bouncy balls that roll, but they're more like a wobbly, they're like a mushroom that you sit on it and it just moves. I do think that would be good for anybody. Here's the thing that occurred to me the other day. We're asking kids to sit in front of a computer now as part of their education. I don't know, for 6 to 8 hours? Really? Like, really? And what are the long-term effects going to be of that? What are those long-term effects? I'm not sure. I am not sure. And what are they going to do after they were online? Get online to do even more? So what I would think is education at this point needs to rethink this all and ask themselves, what is the end result we want here? What is it that we want our kids to learn? And what innovative ways can we have them achieve that rather than think in terms of tradition, that's how we've done things? I think that there's some value to even taking the risk of getting kids back with other kids, having open air schools. Again, but you run into new problems because then people can shoot at them easier. So we're used to now in containing things. It sounds so negative, but I think we'll do that. I will say that I originally was not a fan of online learning. I was paying for my my son and daughter to go to college. I felt like go in person, you're getting your money's worth. But the reality is now my son's doing college degree all online. And I've taken courses. I'm taking a course in neuroanatomy online. It's really convenient. You see not live, but pieces of brain tissue. You'd never see that. You'd all have to go to the lab, and you can stay there. This professor is able to just show it there. She's able to give you a script while she's talking. You can cut and paste. There's going to be some value to this. If I were teaching, and that's what I tried to do today, is to show a video within a video. We'll work on that later, but that's what I would do. I would probably be lecturing some, then give the student a video to look at, give their brain a little bit of relaxation, but focus. If you're teaching about animals in Africa, show that. And I think teachers would do well. I wish the school systems would allow this, for them not to have to be totally live, that they should do a cool video of something that they could get in different clothing and make it dramatic, especially for the younger children, so that then they could say, okay, I'm going to now switch to whatever my daughter would be reenacting, and then she could push a button, have like a 5-minute break while the kid, and she could still see how the kids are responding to the video. But I think we're going to see that. Anxiety reduction is always good. You know, that's encouraging to me, because I think, well, I've talked about anxiety about every which way, but I do think that it's probably really good for us. Really good for us. So I'll be looking at being more structured with that. Well, thank you for enduring another hour with me, or longer than an hour, just a little bit. And I wish you all well, and we'll see you next week. Take care, you guys.